BBOR Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. BlackBoxNed88 on Instagram for the bonus podcast. And just a quick reminder, every Monday is Zodiac Mondays. Wednesday is an Ask Me Anything. That's an AMA, so please drop your questions below for things that you would like discussed here on the show. And Friday is an Anything Goes. Any subject is fair game, mostly talking about true crime, serial killers, the Zodiac Killer, but any subject is welcome. All right, so please share some ideas in the comment section about what you would like to hear about on this channel, and let's get started. Okay, hello everybody. Today is Wednesday, time for the AMA. That is the Ask Me Anything, where I respond to your questions and comments. We go through the material together, and we have a discussion. As you can see from the title here, I'll be talking about the Zodiac Killer suspect Gary Francis post. But just to let you know, I will also be responding to some more general questions and comments about the Zodiac Killer in the later part of the episode, but definitely beginning with the Gary post material. And I would like to remind you guys that I am also the host of the program Astro Psych 400 YouTube channel, really. And yes, it's a different channel here on YouTube, and it is the home of the podcast for sleep. Some people were saying that they use this program, BlackBoxOnlineRadio, to fall asleep at night, so I thought, why not create something specifically customized to help people fall asleep? And you can get that on the channel Astro Psych 400. It comes out on the weekends. And a great way to support both channels is to go over to Amazon.com and have a look at the book Killer on a White Horse by Mead Ned Dahan. There's a link to that in the description box. It is a novel murder mystery inspired by the Zodiac Manson connection, but it is indeed fictional. However, who doesn't love a good mystery? One more time, Killer on a White Horse, available on Amazon.com, link in the description box. And there is always the TeeSpring page. Feel free to have a look at some of the merchandise, and remember, being weird is not a crime. The first comment that I would like to begin with is actually from Christ Hindu, who replied to it was actually yesterday's True Crime Talk Radio episode, simply saying, "Fantastic episode, Ned." And I think that that was perhaps the episode that I've enjoyed recording the most for the year of 2022. In addition to the 3 shows that I talk about in the intro, Zodiac Mondays, the AMA, and the Anything Goes Friday segment, I've been doing True Crime Talk Radio on Tuesdays and the Versus series on Thursdays. Last year I also did the Donna Lass Thursdays, where I was talking about the disappearance of Donna Lass from 1970. But I think that this channel is going to have more of the episodes that are going to be like True Crime Talk Radio, very general discussions, and going from one topic to the next. I personally like the flow of that as someone who is creating these episodes. And also, I love doing this show 5 days a week and talking to you guys about all of these mysteries, unsolved cases, or even sometimes the cases that have been solved and just the psychological elements that are involved with true crime cases. But I think that due to time constraints in the near future, I might be going back to 3 days a week and doing, again, some more general discussions, responding to some news articles, or the way that I used to do Black Box Online Radio, where I wasn't trying to pass myself off as some type of brilliant expert researcher. I wanted people to approach this channel as, all right, I watched a documentary, and if you also watched the same documentary, well, what would it be like if you were talking to a friend about it? And maybe you're also just curious about some of the serial killer cases out there, both solved and unsolved. All right, so I saw a film or listened to a podcast or read some articles, and I'm just responding to it. Again, not as an expert, just as an ordinary follower of this material. So to talk about Gary Francis' post as a Zodiac Killer suspect, he is someone who perhaps needs no introduction, but in 2021, during the fall of that year, a group known as the Case Breakers went public with their findings, and they said that they had solved the Zodiac Killer mystery and identified the killer as none other than Gary Francis Poste, a house painter from California who was also in the Air Force for a time. Gary Francis Poste had a very noticeable scar on his forehead that was from a variant of brain surgery, actually, and the media went wild. I know you guys are very familiar with this story, but the media went wild and they began sharing info about Gary Poste all up and down news articles as well as magazines, not to mention broadcast media, particularly Fox News, ran with the story, and TMZ was actually one of the first news outlets to break the Gary Francis Poste story. And I think a lot of people, and myself included, were very critical of the case breakers for their findings because they didn't just present Gary Poste as a Zodiac killer suspect, saying we have a new person of interest or we have a new suspect. They said that they had solved the case, and their press release was not very convincing. But to give a little bit more of an introduction, Gary Poste is now featured on famousbirthdays.com, and I do have to take an exception with the way that this website has been arranged because it says Gary Francis Poste was listed as a criminal. And I'm like, okay, I mean, he did indeed have an arrest when he was 78 years old, but I think they're referring to the Zodiac crimes, and he has not only never been charged or convicted of anything related to the Zodiac killer, this is a very new, well, Gary Poste's role in the mainstream media is very new, I should say. But yes, Gary Poste was born on November 8th, 1937, in Groveland, California, and he died in 2018. And the section here on famousbirthdays.com says he was an Air Force veteran who was identified as the notorious Zodiac killer by a cold case task force in 2021. He lived in a small Sierra Nevada town, and there's a piece of trivia they call it. According to the San Francisco Chronicle, his former daughter-in-law and another relative accused him of being the killer. He was married. The Zodiac killings were made into a 2007 film with Jake Gyllenhaal playing the lead, also starring Mark Ruffalo and Robert Downey Jr. And our next comment is from Brandon Nodnarb, who says, "This guy is almost certainly the Zodiac. Sounds like sour grapes. Instead of being mad that the case may be cracked, you should focus on finding out more about this guy and maybe trying to put rest to some of the ciphers and puzzles together. The scars on the forehead are undeniable to me, as well as his wrist size, shoe size, occupation, location, and psychological profile. I'm not sure how you obtained either the Zodiac's wrist size or Gary Poste's wrist size, and how you would be able to match those up together. And also, I have not read his shoe size online. Occupation, though, Gary Poste was a house painter, and a lot of people believe the Zodiac was someone who had regular employment, but maybe at somewhat of a more prestigious or a more professional background. And there are some people flat out who think that the Zodiac killer was a scientist or a mathematician or some type of engineer, and that there are all of these clues that are found in the Zodiac letters and ciphers that show a very high understanding of either math or the sciences, maybe both. But maybe you're referring to the fact that Gary Poste was an Air Force veteran, and this is the way that people try to craft their theories. And no disrespect to them, and I'm not even saying that they're wrong. It's actually somewhat of a good idea when they look at somebody who's ex-military but then goes on to work a more manual labor style job. They say that, oh, well, he would have learned all about these things in the military and then goes on to become somewhat of a gifted underachiever or a gifted underperformer. That I won't challenge you on, but the point where I do have to challenge you is the scars on the forehead are almost certainly incorrect. There really has never been any description of the Zodiac killer having scars on the forehead. And what the case breakers were looking at were most likely just additional details that were drawn in by the artist. Some people were saying to fill space, but as I also hypothesized, it would be to show the age of the suspect in the composite sketches, most notably the ones that were drawn after the Stein shooting. But Red Random Rage has a response to Brandon's comment about Gary Poste, saying, "Almost certainly people have been saying the same thing for Arthur Lee Allen and Larry Kane. We need to do more than just circumstantial evidence to confirm who was the Zodiac, which would be hard to do due to how many unconfirmed victims there are." Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this last part here, how many unconfirmed victims? Like, say, for example, many people believe that Sherry Jo Bates was murdered by the Zodiac Killer on October 30th of 1966. I personally do not. But there are all kinds of pieces of physical evidence that are left behind at the after the murder of Sherry Jo Bates, and even the watch that I guess that's how Brandon is referring to Gary Post's wrist size, but there was a watch that was torn apart in the Sherry Jo Bates murder. So there's all that physical evidence, but if she wasn't a Zodiac killer victim, then that's going to be somebody else's physical evidence. And I'm not 100% certain that Sherry Jo Bates was not killed by the Zodiac. I do not believe that she was, based on the way that I've looked into the case over the years, but the same is true of the Kathleen Johns incident. It's an unconfirmed crime. The Domingos Edwards murders, unconfirmed Zodiac crime. With the attacks that happened from 1968 to 69, beginning with Lake Herman Road and ending with the Stein shooting, there really isn't a lot of physical evidence that has been left behind. And some people were simply just asking the question, how is this case going to be solved? Is it going to be solved with the same techniques that were used in the Golden State Killer case, using ancestral DNA, the DNA and genealogical websites? I am really tempted to say no, because I've been corresponding a lot with Mike Rodelli, author of In the Shadow of Mount Diablo and The Hunt for Zodiac, and Mike Rodelli has been very passionate about how they will not solve the case with DNA. They don't have the Zodiac's DNA. This whole thing about how the Zodiac licked the envelopes and put them in the mail because he couldn't have foreseen the future DNA technologies coming about is heavily challenged by Mike Rodelli, because he says most likely the Zodiac killer was using a sponge and water to seal the envelopes, and they weren't able to extract DNA from the bottom of the stamp, like the underside of the stamp that would have been pressed against the letter, or from the backs of the envelopes. Instead, they had some touch DNA that was on the outside surface of an envelope near the stamp, and that isn't necessarily going to even come from the killer himself, excuse me. And our next comment about Gary Post comes from Crazy Inside Forever, who says, "This Gary Post situation reminds me a lot of Arthur Lee Allen and The Circumstance. It's reminiscent, like how Graysmith essentially plastered Arthur Lee Allen everywhere as a confirmed Zodiac verdict, causing everyone in the Zodiac scene to kind of point their sights in his direction. But even then, Graysmith at least had way more viable evidence for Arthur Lee Allen than this entire team does for Gary Post." I do somewhat agree with that, except Arthur Lee Allen was a lot more than just Graysmith's suspect. He was also one of the few, or maybe one of the only suspects that was truly identified by law enforcement and examined. I think I should say that he's the only suspect that has search warrants written for his home in connection to the Zodiac killer mystery. If I'm wrong about that, I'm open to correction in the comments section. But he was also one of the only suspects evaluated by ABC News. And that's the stuff that Mike Rodelli was talking about when they were testing DNA. Shel Cavale was another suspect that was evaluated by ABC News and comparing and contrasting the DNA samples. But Graysmith wasn't the origin of Arthur Lee Allen, the way that, well, perhaps even the case breakers aren't the origin of Gary Francis Post. There is a journalist that worked with them named Dale Julin, who has a book coming out, who has been more or less the lifeline of this Gary Francis Post theory, and in many of the sources, Dale Julin is cited as being the person who is the authority on the Gary Post theory. I believe that the title of his book is going to be Catching Zodiac, but to the best of my knowledge, it is not out at this time. But it also seems that the case breakers are working on a documentary about their findings. It might even turn into a docu-series. So I could respond to maybe 5 or 6 comments all at once by just saying, it seems like a very strong for-profit case, no matter what. These people are trying to profit from their findings. And some people write books, right? Some people make documentaries because they want to share their analysis with the world if they think they actually have something. And yes, they want to be paid for it because it's their analysis. They aren't selling the tragedy. They're selling their research and their findings, and they're showing how that they came up with this. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. I mean, I could never get mad at anyone for selling a book, but if it's done in bad faith, then yes, I would be very mad about that. And I'm not completely sure what is going on in their minds or in their hearts, but it definitely appears that they are trying to get money out of this, or trying to milk this thing for everything that it's worth. I don't know if they're lying or not, if they just made up this story about some guy who 6 months ago was just a deceased house painter from Groveland, California. Now all of a sudden he has a profile on famousbirthdays.com and he is listed as a criminal. He's famous for being a criminal. No, but Gary Post did have an arrest for, I believe it was some type of domestic violence encounter involving his wife, and he ended up pushing her down the stairs. Please don't quote me on any of those specific details, but he was arrested when he was 78 years old, and the arrest log stated that his height was at 6 feet tall and his weight was at 175 pounds. And I don't have the next comment in front of me, so I'm going to paraphrase it, but I know it came from Charles Garati, so big thank you to that comment. And he wanted to respond to a particular criticism that I had made of the case breakers. In my first episode on Gary Francis post that I ever did, I was talking about how they had this photo of a piece of wood with a shadow on it, and they were saying that Gary Post took a selfie wearing the Lake Berryessa hood, and that it was capturing the shadow of that hood that was worn by the Zodiac killer on September 27th of 1969 to murder Cecilia Shepard and to stab Brian Hartnell. Brian Hartnell would go on to survive, and they said that that shadow on a piece of wood was indeed the Lake Berryessa costume. The comment was about how they believe that the photo was taken in the early 1980s, 1980 to be exact, and that the suspect, Gary Post, would have returned to Lake Berryessa and taken the silhouetted photo there. And the piece of wood in the background is one of the Lake Berryessa trees, and that it's just done as paying a homage or some type of sinister tribute to a crime that he had indeed committed. Now, there are two things that I need to say about that. The first is that I'm glad that they actually have some reasons why they're showing that shadow on a piece of wood, and they actually have some type of explanation, because that was why I came down so harshly on the case breakers back in 2021, because all of their observations did not seem very serious, and I even said in my follow-up episode to that, this almost seems like a prank or a social experiment where these people are just messing with us. They're like comparing a human being to a cartoon, like just a sketch that was done by the cartoonist Robert Smith II. And then there was this shadow on a piece of wood, and it was like, how on earth could you say that's the Lake Berryessa hood? But I'm glad they have an explanation for it, that they think he returned to Lake Berryessa and he took the silhouetted selfie. The problem is, though, that is just taking some very basic, bare bones, overly simplified facts and then connecting them together with storytelling. This is what I was talking about on True Crime Talk Radio yesterday, where, yes, they now have some type of storytelling mechanism going on, or they're stitching together these very simple facts with a story. And maybe you've also heard about how they said that Gary Francis Post buried the guns that were used in the Zodiac crimes, and they're trying to locate the area. Well, if they're trying to locate them, that means that they haven't solved the case. And I think no matter what, people should agree that the case breakers should not have said that they solved the case. And somebody was like, oh, well, they mean case solved, not case cracked. I was like, I don't care about that. That's just a phraseology debate that we don't need to have. They made that statement either prematurely or for a long time. I was genuinely thinking that it was a prank or a social experiment. By social experiment, I mean this group of people is saying, hey, let's say that we solved the Zodiac killer mystery, and maybe our website will get more traffic. Maybe people will pick up the story. And that worked. Before I would ever criticize them, I would have to admit that that worked. And it's very, very saddening that if someone were to actually do that, because this isn't just a storytelling competition. Real people were indeed murdered, and also, the families of the victims are still alive. This should be approached with a certain sense of sensitivity, integrity, and honesty, of course. But the case breakers don't only accuse Gary Post of committing the Zodiac killers crimes from 68 to 69. They also accused him of the 1966 murder of Sherry Jo Bates, which I have briefly talked about in this episode, but also the 1970 disappearance of Donna Lass. They believe that Gary Poste abducted and murdered Donna Lass. Donna Lass was abducted on September 6th of that year, to the best of our knowledge. I mean, I shouldn't even say that because that is hardly a proven fact. She is simply a woman who vanished off the face of the earth while she was working at the Sahara Tahoe Hotel and Casino. And what they believe is that Gary Poste took Donna Lass somewhere into the woods surrounding Lake Tahoe, and she was hanged from a tree, and he once gave it away to somebody by sharing the clue, I put a she in the tree, or there was a she in the tree, and somebody wanted to respond to that one. And Mike J. O'Callahan would like to respond to that when he says, it's a bit of a come down for the Zodiac to swap his cryptograms for, I'd put a she in a tree, like some type of serial killer version of Dr. Seuss. Sadly, though, the average punter will probably buy the book about Gary Poste if they only have a passing interest in the case and can't see that these guys have given us literally nothing in the way of evidence. Excellent comment, Mike. Simon responded to Mike's comment by saying, I have an interest in this case, and I refuse to buy any book that accuses anyone without having physical evidence to back up their accusation. So far, no one has that. Well, it's definitely an unsolved case, and I don't even fault too many people, though, for selling books about identifying a particular suspect, especially one who has either been convicted for another crime. A lot of the Zodiac suspects are in jail, like maybe Ted Kaczynski or Bruce Davis, who are already serving life sentences. I mean, yes, you can accuse them of things if you genuinely do believe they are the Zodiac killer, but when you're just accusing someone of a crime they've never been charged with who is still currently alive, then it really is somewhat of an ethical question. I'm fully aware Gary Poste has passed away, but even to do that to someone posthumously is quite odd when their physical evidence was quite lacking. And that was another reason why I got so fired up last year when I was responding to these Gary Poste accusations, because the case breakers said that they had solved the case. But then they said they're attempting to harvest his DNA. They're trying to harvest his DNA. Okay, so why on earth do you have to say that you solved the case when you don't have the DNA yet? I mean, it's just, if they had just presented it as, okay, this is our suspect, we think this guy's the Zodiac killer, people would have approached it definitely with a little bit more curiosity, whereas some people are just calling in the media saying that they solved the case for what? Well, I mean, some twisted story about a shadow on a piece of wood. We have a comment from Colonel Reb about the case breakers and their Donna Lass theory involving Gary Poste, and Colonel Reb says, if this suspect doesn't pan out for the case breakers, they might as well close up shop. Their credibility will be shit. I don't think Poste or even the Zodiac had anything to do with Donna Lass. Then again, Ned, the Zodiac did say, by rope, maybe he hung the she in the tree. And there are some H-A-H-A-H-A, meaning ha 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 ha. I really didn't want to read it out because it's going to sound really awkward in my tone of voice, but yes, ha 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 ha. It's meant to be taken with a grain of humor. But to respond to this in a serious way. All right. The Zodiac Killer did write on the Halloween card that was mailed on October 27th of 1970, by rope, by knife, by gun, by fire. And the researcher Tahoe 27 tracked this down to a cover of a Tim Holt comic book that talks about the Wheel of Death. And Tim Holt is actually in the character mode of Red Mask, and Lady Doom is spinning the Wheel of Death, and you can see by rope, by knife, by gun, by fire. And one of the items is covered up on the Wheel of Death, and the Wheel of Death is actually a larger figure from literary circles. It's called the Lady of Situations, and the Lady Doom is spinning the Wheel of Situations and the Wheel of Time and such. It is a bigger literary theme that has been used for centuries, more or less. Just one little piece of info from that Donna Lass episode that I did about the case breakers and their claim, and it's under the Disappearance of Donna Lass, Suspects Gary Poste and William Grant. That is the name of the episode if anyone would like to hear it in its entirety. Dale Julin, along with the case breakers, claimed that Gary Poste hanged Donna Lass from a tree. I put the she in a tree. That right, but they also claimed that they had pinpointed on a map exactly where that tree was. They claimed that they had identified the tree some way, somehow, and then they even brought a team out there to try and find Donna Lass's remains by that tree that they had identified using coordinates or something like that, and they didn't find any physical evidence. And then Dale Julian responded by saying, well, they needed to have searched the surrounding areas. And I was just thinking, oh, no, you don't. You said that you found the exact location, and then it wasn't there. There wasn't any physical evidence there. Yes, I'm fully aware that evidence could be moved over 50 years, but not an ounce of any physical evidence that supported your theory at all. And then you say, well, we need to look somewhere else. No, you said you found the place. You said X marks the spot here. It doesn't look like they found anything. Again, the case breakers have come up short. And I said that in this episode I was going to talk about some other Zodiac related questions. And on Zodiac Monday, I did an episode called Zodiac Killer Arthur Lee Allen Extended Edition. And Arthur Lee Allen is a suspect whom I've talked about in many different episodes. I've never done an episode that's flat out just called Zodiac Killer Arthur Lee Allen or Arthur Lee Allen Full Breakdown. But I wanted to do the extended edition because at first I really wanted to talk about the possible confession that was made to the people known as the Seawaters, particularly Dave and Connie Seawater, and they have a video out on their YouTube channel telling the story of how Arthur Lee Allen made a confession to not only being the Zodiac Killer, but also crimes of molestation 30 days before he died in 1992. And I talked a lot about that in the video, but I also wanted to call it Extended Edition because I wanted to cover everything related to Arthur Lee Allen. And we have another comment here from Christ Hindu who says, Ned, here's a question for your AMA series. Do you think the Zodiac Killer lived in Vallejo at the time of the murders, or outside of Vallejo but was very familiar with that area? If I had to make a decision right now, I would think that the Zodiac did not live in Vallejo. Why? Because Vallejo is mentioned so frequently. The Zodiac Killer even wrote Vallejo on Brian Hartnell's car door after the Lake Berryessa stabbing on September 27th of 69. There's a Zodiac symbol, the word Vallejo, the dates of Zodiac activity, and then the words by knife. By knife, it could be connected to the Wheel of Death once again. So Vallejo is also mentioned frequently. The Zodiac wrote about Vallejo in the letters, and the Zodiac did not talk about Benicia, for example. Lake Herman Road, the site of the first confirmed crime, December 20th, 1968, the murders of David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen, occurred in a parking lot off of Lake Herman Road, which is a shortcut or connecting road between Benicia and Vallejo. I mean, the Zodiac definitely had intense familiarity with the town of Vallejo. Did he actually live there? I know this is going to sound really, really weird. This is a really weird way of answering this very good question. But I was watching the miniseries Night Sins earlier this year, just on YouTube. It was put out in the late 90s, I think 99. And they talk about how a serial killer thrill kill club would form. And I'm not... Okay, I'll just get to the point. The point is, they're like, somebody is thinking about committing a calculated crime in this county, and a calculated crime in that county, and a calculated crime in that county, and they're just all over the map. Because on the one hand, I'm hearing people say that the Zodiac Killer is some type of cold, methodical, and calculating thrill killer, yet he's going to commit a crime 10 minutes from his home, and then just drive straight back. I never had that gut instinct, and I repeat, that's a gut instinct. I certainly don't know what the Zodiac Killer was thinking, and it really becomes quite difficult if someone is dealing with psychotic episodes and such to unravel the thinking of a madman. There is no logic in psychosis. That's one of the characteristics of it. But if I had to say, did the Zodiac live in Vallejo? I would say no, and I would think that a methodical and calculating serial killer, or whatever's happening, is going on with choosing locations that are more distant from his home. Just my 2 cents on the subject. If you want to dispute that with me in the comments section, I would love to read your responses, because I'm not even completely sold on that. It's just, something that I've thought about. One writer who is also very big on the Zodiac Killer not living in Vallejo is Michael Cole, author of the Zodiac Revisited trilogy. And one point that I think Michael Cole and I more strongly agree on is the Zodiac Killer did not live in Presidio Heights. Presidio Heights is the scene of the final Zodiac murder on October 11th of 1969, where Paul Stine was murdered. He was the taxi driver, and the Zodiac Killer mailed in pieces of Paul Stine's bloody shirt in multiple letters. But I think that the people who have a suspect who live near Presidio Heights are just making an unfair assumption. They think that the Zodiac murdered Paul Stine and then walked to his home, and that's how he evaded capture. I think that there's something missing in their theories, and they're providing this explanation about how, oh, well, he just walked home, and that's how he wasn't caught. I don't really think that is I think that it's almost forcing a theory too much. And also the same reason the cold, methodical, and calculating serial killer is going to commit a crime a couple blocks away, or the Blue Rock Springs shooting, like maybe 10, 15 minutes away, and then drive home. I just don't believe that that's what happened. But if I'm wrong, I will gladly admit it. And we have a comment from Playtime on the same episode. The best of us is Richard Grinnell, and he concludes that the Zodiac clearly disguised his handwriting. One reason was to keep from getting in trouble, but also to get his letters by monitors in the post office. If detected, they were to hand them over to the FBI and not send them to newspapers. Well, those are some kind words to say about Richard Grinnell, who runs ZodiacCiphers.com, and he's also the co-host of Zodiac Speaking. And the reason why I wanted to read this one off is, if you have not subscribed to the Zodiac Killer channel here on YouTube, I invite you to subscribe. I am also the host of the Zodiac Killer channel's Interview with the Expert series, and hopefully in the next couple weeks we will be doing an interview with Richard Grinnell of ZodiacCiphers.com. I think that he is just an excellent researcher, and he has compiled so much information. I'm really looking forward to that, so if you haven't heard the Interviews with the Experts series, there are numerous ones that have been uploaded now. We've done interviews with Michael Butterfield, Michael Cole, whom I was just talking about, Mike Rodelli, Mike Morford, lots of people named Michael for some reason, but, well, nothing wrong with that. And we have a comment from Tom Voigt about Arthur Lee Allen, because in that episode I was talking about the motorist who was arrested, or stopped by the police, rather, I should say just stopped by the police outside of Ukiah, California in 1969, who had two bloody knives on his car. And what was the origin of the story of Arthur Lee Allen having knives in his car on the date of the Lake Berryessa stabbing? And this is from Tom Voigt. The story of Allen having bloody knives in his car on the day of the Berryessa attack was offered by Arthur Lee Allen himself during the 1971 interrogation in August. It's on page 5 of the Mullinax report. So thank you, Tom Voigt, for that one. And Tom Voigt also left another comment about Arthur Lee Allen's health issues, particularly his feet. And he says, Arthur Lee Allen's health issues, including problems with his legs and feet, developed late in his life. In 1969, the only health or injury issue Allen had was the result of a motorcycle accident in the mid-1960s, but the injury did not cause a limp in any way. And some people really have been skeptical of Arthur Lee Allen being the Zodiac Killer, including me, for that reason about, the Zodiac walking with a limp, because at Lake Berryessa that wasn't really mentioned by the witnesses, and if anything, they said he was walking briskly, but that could be somewhat of a game changer. You guys who followed this channel know I'm still not very sold on Arthur Lee Allen as the Zodiac Killer. I never thought that he was the Zodiac. Well, firstly, I didn't think that he matched the physical descriptions facially, as well as I think that people were making assumptions about how, well, he may have been wearing a wig at certain occasions. Again, I don't really find that a very solid explanation, and view it as more of an assumption. If somebody were to wear wigs regularly, or that they had lots of them in their possession, like, say, for example, Robert Linkletter is a Zodiac Killer suspect, and in the original outline of the theory, they say very clearly that he was known to wear wigs frequently. He was known to change his facial hair, beard length, hair length. He changed all of it. He did that very frequently during the 1960s. Okay, that's more of a solid explanation, and I don't really know if I've heard those types of details about Arthur Lee Allen. And now I would like to go to some of the comments that you guys left on the episode Zodiac Killer Guy Ward Hendrickson, talking about the suspect that was put forward by Deborah Perez, Guy Ward Hendrickson's adoptive daughter. And she is someone who gets pulled into a lot of the same territory as the case breakers. She pulled in the media. And Deborah Perez, though, did something quite different than the case breakers. In addition to just saying that she has a suspect, it is firstly her father, adoptive father, that is. She was not his blood daughter, but stepfather, then adoptive father. He met her mother in Tijuana, Mexico, actually, and then they came to the United States. But she said that not only her father was the Zodiac, but also she was the illegitimate daughter of John F. Kennedy, and even more so that she was an active participant in the Zodiac Killer mystery, being the author of the December 20th, 1969 Melvin Belli letter. So, I'm, yeah, okay, that's nice, but Crazy Inside Forever has a comment about her suspect, Guy Ward Hendrickson. It's interesting that you said that Guy Hendrickson was a bit too old to be the Zodiac. I've personally believed that the Zodiac was a younger person too, not as a teenager like in the Louis Myers theory, or some 20-year-old, but maybe someone at least in their mid-30s, meaning that if the Zodiac were alive today, he would be in his mid-80s. But like a lot of people, I think it's highly unlikely whoever the Zodiac Killer was is still living, especially due to how bold he was. It would be very unusual for him to just randomly stop killing. Serial killers usually don't stop what they're doing unless they are either caught or locked up for another crime that they have done themselves. About the age of the suspect, right? Guy Ward Hendrickson was born in 1915, 54 years old in 1969. Absolutely, I think that he is too old to be the Zodiac Killer, especially when you have witness descriptions, maybe talking about a 25-year-old. Brian Hartnell said that the voice that he heard at Lake Berryessa behind the Zodiac Killer's mask sounded like somebody 20 to 30 years old. I mean, so is this guy 54 years old, or is he 20 years old? I mean, no, I just don't think that Guy Ward Hendrickson was the Zodiac. What the bigger mystery is, though, what is Deborah Perez's motivation? Why is this person coming forward and saying that not only was her father the Zodiac, but also that she wrote the Melvin Belli letter? And you might remember the press conference that she gave in a very public setting where there were reporters all around her, and she said that she was driven to the sites of 2 locations. I believe, just going off of memory, she was present for the Stein murder and the Blue Rock Springs shooting. And with the Blue Rock Springs shooting, she could hear the gunshots that sounded like this popping noise and such, but she was very young at the time. Now, I would like to address the second part of this here. Why do serial killers stop killing? Well, as I said, numerous people have suspects about they think that the Zodiac Killer didn't stop killing, that he went on to commit additional crimes in a different way. The Zodiac Unabomber connection is one of the more famous examples of that's been promoted by people like Douglas Oswell and Mark Hewitt. But also, there's the Zodiac Golden State Killer connection, where Ann Penn believes that the Golden State Killer and the Zodiac Killer were the same person. She is the author of the book Serial Slaughter and What If Golden State Killer Zodiac Solved. And tomorrow on the Anything Goes segment, no, tomorrow is Thursday, Friday on the Anything Goes segment, I'm going to be talking about the Anthrax Killer again. Tyler Grover provided me with a book called The Mirage Man, all about Bruce Ivins and the likelihood of him being the Anthrax Killer. Bruce Ivins was not convicted of that, but I got on to reading about the Anthrax Killer because Tyler had written out a theory for this channel, more like a possibility, rather, of whether or not the Zodiac Killer and the Anthrax Killer were the same person. So, lots of people have their theories about how the Zodiac continued to kill. Why would a serial killer stop killing? Number one, maybe they're unable to do so. There is some type of health problem, or there's some type of way in which that their brain is telling them, if I keep doing this, I'm going to get caught. Their predatory instincts tell them that this is now a bad idea and you shouldn't be doing this anymore. Another reason why serial killers stop killing is because they have certain stressors in their life and they become more involved with, getting married and new types of careers, and they simply have moved on from their destructive tendencies, and they have what's called a reign of terror, maybe 8 years or 12 years, and then after they've had these life-changing experiences, they choose to stop killing. But a lot of people believe it's related to the decrease in testosterone. And I was talking about the eyeball killer once on the Versus series a couple weeks ago, and the eyeball killer was someone who started killing in his late 50s. If he indeed did start then, I mean, we don't really know, but he was a man from Texas who started murdering sex workers in his later years. I mean, sometimes that does happen, but that is very abnormal. Most serial killers operate in the 20s, 30s, and into the early 40s, and then there's that decrease in testosterone and decrease in just physical intensity, so to speak, and then they choose to stop killing because their predatory instincts tell them, if I keep doing this, I will get caught. But as far as Deborah Perez goes and her suspect guy Ward Hendrickson, I said the biggest part of the mystery is, what is her agenda? Is she telling the truth? Is she insane? Does she have some type of mental disability? Oh, what was the name of that true crime writer? It was M. William Phelps says flat out, she believes everything she's saying, she's just mistaken. But it's a little bit more than just a theory. If she says she authored the Melvin Belli letter, she heard the gunshots of certain Zodiac crimes, that she was an active participant in some way, or at least present when certain crimes were happening. So, what's going on? What's her agenda? Well, the family of Deborah Perez and the biological daughters of Guy Ward Hendrickson, meaning that her stepsisters, I guess we could call them that, they flat out rejected anything about insanity. They said, no, she's not crazy. She's doing this for profit. Because, very similar to the Case Breakers, there was all this talk about how Deborah Perez was going to get a documentary deal and that they were going to do some type of expose on the Zodiac Killer and her suspect, Guy Ward Hendrickson. But as far as I know, that did not happen. And we have a comment from Batman66 who says, could the Zodiac Killer have been an actual shapeshifter? This would explain the inability of him to ever being apprehended, let alone captured. Shapeshifter is the person who always seems to find a way to fit in regardless of the circumstances. Everyone loves a shapeshifter, but deep down they may wonder if they really know them. What's more, most people sense a current of anger or rage in a shapeshifter, and they never want to see that side of the person. And it says that's a quotation from C.C. Hunter. So, I mean, shapeshifter, I hope you guys are clear that that is a label, or it's a psychological term, someone who can blend in, but maybe they're concealing an identity. Most serial killers operate in this way. I do mean that with all sincerity. They blend in, they're often described as the nicest guy in the world, or they just seem like they're totally harmless, and that is something that needs to be emphasized. Whether you're talking about the Zodiac Killer or any other person from the true crime world, when I was doing the episode on the serial killer John Aykroyd for the Ghosts of Highway 20, it was a response to the documentary film, which is out here on the channel, and some additional information about about the about the serial killer John Aykroyd. A woman was abducted by him, and she just said he was completely non-threatening, didn't give off a single vibe that he might be doing something dangerous, and I spoke too quickly and I missed the channel's name. I believe it's on the Oregonian that has aired the full documentary Ghosts of Highway 20 about him. And you can also hear my response, Serial Killer John Aykroyd, on this channel. But Roger Kibbe, the I-5 Strangler, that's another perfect example. He would abduct his victims. Well, he's just driving along in his car. At one time, Roger Kibbe even abducted the mother. I shouldn't say that. He gave the mother of a victim a ride to a payphone, and then he drove back and let the mother out of the car, and then tried to drive her daughter somewhere to get help because their car had broken down, and he murdered her daughter. But the amount of effort and just putting on that gentle facade when the person's a serial killer, it's just a concocted plan to murder people. It happens all the time. So would the Zodiac Killer have been a shapeshifter, someone who is just blending in, and people can sense maybe this person has a really nasty dark side, but they don't want to see it, or just they can kind of get the vibe that the person is almost being too nice. Now, somebody put this quotation out there. You guys can respond to this if you want in the comment section that just said, the nicer somebody is, the more they conceal their dark side. I don't completely know if that's true or not. Part of me wants to be somewhat hopeful about humanity and think that, okay, maybe there actually are nice people in the world who are doing things because they believe it is a good thing to do. And I talk a lot about psychology on this channel. I know that they're just fueling different components of their own brain chemistry, but I really want to hope that being nice is not just a facade for destructive tendencies, and that, oh yeah, these are terrible people. They're just pretending to be nice and so on. However, I don't know. I mean, it really is somewhat of a mystery. But most people who get into profiling about the Zodiac killer think that he was someone who was working a regular job, maybe 9 to 5, maybe some different hours. He could only operate on nights, evenings, weekends, and holidays because he's working a regular lifestyle, and he is not someone who is killing because of a sexual urge. Instead, he was doing this in a cool, methodical, and calculating way. A lot of people think the Zodiac Killer was married. I mean, people go back and forth on that all the time. Some people think that you need to absolutely get rid of all the suspects who were married. They're like, the Zodiac Killer was either an incel, like an involuntary celibate, or a closeted homosexual, someone who was fueled by heterosexual animosity and wasn't getting the physical intimacy that he wanted, and he also thought that he was more intelligent than other people, and he had a lot of resentment towards couples who were able to live outward romantic lifestyles. That's why he targeted lovers' lanes and went after couples at Lake Herman Road, Blue Rock Springs, and Lake Berryessa. Now, the Stein murder does change some of that, but I've talked about that in a lot of different episodes. But then some people are just like, no, the Zodiac Killer was married. Other people are like, no, he wasn't. You can even respond to that as a final challenge question here. Anything you would like to say about Gary Post or some of the other suspects we've talked about, Arthur Lee Allen, Guy Ward Hendrickson, and the other things like the Zodiac Unabomber connection, Zodiac Golden State Killer connection. If you have anything to say at all, please put your ideas down in the comment section below. If you also would like to write the show, you can do that at BlackBoxOnlineRadio@AOL.com. My email is posted in the description box, as well as my personal Facebook and BlackBoxNet88 on Instagram. And of course, one more time, Killer on a White Horse available on Amazon.com and the Teespring page where you can look at the merchandise. I will see you over on Instagram for the bonus podcast. Until next time.